Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we look at the news making the headlines in domestic politics this week. In the last episode, I had told you that I would be back with the follow-up on just what went down when Prime Minister Narendra Modi sat across the table with 14 leaders from 8 mainstream Jammu and Kashmir parties to take forward the political process there, which had been in a limbo ever since the events of August 5th, 2019, when the special status for Jammu and Kashmir was revoked. The erstwhile state split into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir, which was supposed to have an assembly, and Ladakh, which was not supposed to have an assembly. In this episode, since we have explored a lot of what went on in the 22 months since August 15, 2019 and June 2021, we will basically look at the takeaways, the basic takeaways from this meeting. Before we get into the takeaways of this meeting, let me just touch upon a bit about how this meeting was organized. It was driven by the Prime Minister's office. The National Security Advisor and the security establishment were also deeply involved in setting up this meeting. This was so because after 2018, when the BJP-PDP government of that time fell, there were attempts by the centre to develop an alternative leadership, but this could not be done in any kind of organized way. While there were some voices that did come out, it was not in an organized sort of way, and these outfits lacked political legitimacy. The District Development Council polls that happened after saw the People's Alliance for Gupkar Declaration do quite well, and therefore it was very clear that if there was to be a push for the delimitation process, for delineating assembly seats, and then after that to go forward to an assembly election in Jammu and Kashmir, these parties would have to be engaged. At the meeting, which by all accounts was held in a cordial atmosphere, the Prime Minister heard out all the leaders sitting across the table from him, knowing that much of it would be for public consumption. All the leaders spoke about their deep distress at the revocation of Article 370, but this was more in the manner of a sentiment which was expressed, and there were frequent references to the fact that now it was a legal battle, a constitutional battle, because several legal challenges to the revocation of Article 370 are now before the Supreme Court, but haven't been heard in the last 2 years. There were some louder voices, of course, in protest against 370, including that of People's Democratic Party leader Mehbooba Mufti. But the Congress and the National Conference both emphasized that they wanted statehood before any conduct of any elections, assembly elections in the state, because that assembly would be for a union territory. They wanted statehood for Jammu and Kashmir to be declared beforehand, so that the assembly which was elected would be that of a full state. Both the NC and the Congress expressed hope that some of the rights that had been lost by Jammu and Kashmir, that is ownership of land and protection of employment for locals and a Jammu and Kashmir cadre of officers serving the state, would be restored. There were some interesting standouts as well, and that was Muzaffar Beg of the People's Conference, who said that he had asked for a 371-like provision for Jammu and Kashmir. These are the 371 provision is applicable to certain states in northeast India, which protects land rights and other rights of indigenous populations in those areas. In all of this, what has the government gained out of this exercise? Well, the meeting was well attended, despite the political acrimony, and it was done so without any preconditions being set by the political leaders. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah were able to convey that there was no going back on the revocation of Article 370, and that constructive engagement with the delimitation process was solicited from all political parties so that assembly elections could be held, and that these assembly elections to a union territory would be a precondition to the eventual restoration of statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. Lastly, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, even if he had to sit across the table from political leaders, members of his own Council of Ministers have pejoratively referred to as the Gupkar gang, a spirit of pragmatism and realpolitik prevailed over this meeting. So what are the big takeaways from this meeting? Prime Minister Narendra Modi has narrowly escaped talk of a political boycott of these forthcoming assembly elections, which will follow the delimitation process. Talk of a boycott of any kind would have hurt the international image of the government of India and robbed this legislative action of any legitimacy on the ground. The fact that he managed to keep the Hurriyat conference out of this set of meetings is also a point to be noted. More than anything else, this meeting has ended a 22-month limbo when it comes to the political process in Jammu and Kashmir. Here, I would like to add a little editorial point. This meeting was called to reset a political equilibrium between the central government and the political parties and those with a political stake in Jammu and Kashmir. In my view, despite Prime Minister Modi's flowery turn of phrase saying Dil ki duri aur Dilli ki duri dono hi kam honi chahiye, this particular engagement will rely less on grand gestures and more on pragmatic realpolitik on the ground. That's all from me this week. I'll see you next week.